honored to introduce a very special person, our guest, our keynote speaker today, Professor Nermin Abadanat. She's a remarkable person always. She's a source of inspiration and courage for us. Almost all of us know her, but little introduction about her. Professor Abadanat had a long and distinguished career on migration studies. In addition to migration studies, she has also worked on gender issues, position of women, mass communication, electoral studies, and education. She graduated from Istanbul Law School, and she was awarded a Fulbright scholarship to do graduate work at the University of Minnesota from 1952-53. She was at the, also later coming to Turkey, she was at the Ankara University and Istanbul University, and served as visiting professors at the University of Munich, the University of New York, Denver University, Georgetown University, and University of California at Los Angeles. Before the 1980 military coup, in fact, she was a member of the upper house, the Senate of Turkey. Currently, she teaches at the Boğaziçi University. She has tons of articles and books. In fact, if I name some of the books, among them Turkish Workers in Europe, dated 1976, Migration and Development, same year, 1976, Women in Turkish Society, 1981, and the last one, 2011, in fact, this one, Turks in Europe, from guest workers to transnational citizens. I should stress that when she published this book the same year, in fact, she celebrated her 90th birthday. As I said, I'm deeply honored to invite you here. Yes, Professor Nermin Abadanat, thank you.
I have the bad habit to look. I have to look in the eyes of my audience, so I'm not going to sit down. Let me first thank you, express my real thank to Professor Ahmet İçduygu. I have been very fortunate to live long enough to see a great number of former students who became ambassadors, ministers, president of assemblies, you name it. Of course, you are very pleased to see them there. But then there are some scholars whom I know for a long time who have been achieving some sort of, if it's not a miracle, it's near to a miracle. Among them, Ahmet İçduygu takes a special place because, as Martin King Luther said at a point, I have a dream. Well, I also have a dream, had a dream. I wanted to see a full-fledged establishment of a migration center in Turkey. Now, Ahmet Bey has realized it in a wonderful way. Over the last 10 years, he brought together the scholars of different continents and different countries, and he gave the opportunity to young people and not so young people to express their ideas. Now, I first want to congratulate you on this anniversary, which should certainly be remembered for many of us. But now I have a second dream. The second dream is awaiting that you establish an annual review. Your center is most best fitted to do such a publication. And now that we are getting richer and richer. You can boast of putting them all together because the printed word is staying. The spoken word disappears. I also have to say a word to a very dear friend who sits near the window. We belong to the generation for whom the 19th century was not so far away. Professor Rinus Penzing came to Turkey in 1975 as the representative of NAFIC. NAFIC is an organization in Holland which is uniting 16 or 17 universities, and they undertook a very rare study. He and two of his colleagues lived a whole year in Yozgat, in Boğazlayan, which is a district of Yozgat. Yozgat is a province of central Anatolia, and the books they have produced is also available in English. It's called Migration and Development. And what they found out is not something very surprising, that the capitalist system always functions in the favor of those who know how to make money. So all the remittances which were sent from abroad, from different European countries, were not spent so much for the development of Yozgat, but much more for investment in Istanbul. But of course, he could tell you much more than I do. However, he spent a whole year, and this is remarkable because very few scholars are spending so long time in a place given. Alas, before I begin my topic, I have to say a little observation. When I look from time to time at the news on TV, I see a big row of very serious-looking gentlemen, all wearing a tie. And that's politics. Politics is still dominated by men. But when I look at this audience here, and I look at the list of contributors in this conference, you see that the second sex, which is not the second, it's the first, the women are here represented in a large majority. So I think that we should liken the female researchers to the bee, because they are so diligent. They are accumulating wisdom, and they write it, and they don't give up. Congratulations to all these young women who I see here for the first time and who are teaching me new things. I love this new expression of sunset migrant. I never heard it before. I learned it today. Sunset migrants are those groups or people who who lives in Nordic countries and like the sun and like to spend the money better than for heating and energy, and they come to countries like Turkey. Now, this is very important for us because in Alanya, there are about, the paper says 10,000, but there are much more. Only Germans, but there are also Irish people, other people, all sunset migrants. And their being there has changed the whole outlook of Alanya, but that's another subject. Now let me begin my paper. As you know very well, mankind has migrated since it exists. Long before records were taken, history is showing us that wherever and whenever natural disasters occurred, armed conflicts broke out, great epidemics spread, food and resources became scarce, oppression occurred, people left the place and they were born and searched for new opportunities. However, migration during those sequences were usually considered as a side effect of other major incidences. To analyze migration per se, systematically, and to attempt to forge a theoretical explanation, started as the brainchild of an inquisitive-minded scholar named von Ravenstein, a geographer of German origin living in England, who attempted around 1850 to develop certain recurring predictions which could be understood as migration laws. This observation took place in the middle of the 19th century, coinciding with the fast spread of industrialization. Accordingly, Ravenstein stipulates that wages and better working conditions are the major poles of attention for potential migrants. People leave their place, they have been born for better wages. The process includes calculation based on reasoning and advantages. Again, according to Ravenstein, women are preferring places of closer distance, whereas men are not afraid to move overseas and discover unknown territories. The 19th century is the century of mega theories, from Marxism to other ideologies. It pleases people to explain the world in a single theory. Well, a lot of water has flown under the bridges since the Ravenstein prediction. Starting from the area of geography, almost all disciplines in the realm of social sciences took their turn to choose migration as their essential field of exploration. Using geography as a starting point, specialists in the field of statistics began to collect data and thus enabling via population studies to establish certain prognoses. Parallel to these calculations in European countries, the fast transition of the United States from an agrarian country into a rapid growing industrial society, we see a massive outflow of European settlers to the New World. During the late 1890s and the turn of the century, or the turn of the century to the 20th century, more than 20 million people crossed the big lake and tried to find a new homeland in America. This extraordinary intensive population movement encouraged American sociologists to study the impact of these movements and establish time sequences. One of the most remarkable output in this direction has been the study of the Znanecki brothers, who investigated the Polish migration and attempted to formulate certain stages of adaptation. Following their steps, the Chicago school members established the recurrent pattern of generational adaptation. And by doing so, also developed the concept of integration, a word which I don't like. It's very misleading. By measuring the behavior of generations, for them, the first generation of migrants complete the process of achievement by successfully entering into the market economy. The newcomers are happy to get a job. They enter the factories, get used to punctuality, standard work, long working hours following instructions. Their private life remains untouched. The second generation, however, not only continues to follow the established pattern of their parents, but also masters the language, enters schools, completes some kind of education, and espouses some part of the culture of the new homeland. They begin to socialize, creating networks with people of the same cohort. The third generation, by establishing new families, choosing a spouse, raising children, completes the process of integration. And by doing so, they become real Americans. This prediction rests upon an uninterrupted process based upon 3 generations. The assumption is that all the problems will be solved by themselves without the intervention of the state or other authorities. Accordingly, migration, whether large scale or small, is the product of individual decisions. Interference or support of external actors, such as the state or local administrative unit, is not demanded. This is also the philosophy of America, to be as far as possible away from government. These presumptions drastically changes with the advent of the 20th century. The outbreak of 2 world wars, the emergence of a series of autocratic regimes, dictatorships, places demographic movements in the forefront of political negotiations and peacemaking, such as, for instance, the population exchange agreement between Turkey and Greece following the War of Independence. Millions of people have been uprooted from their homes in Greece and came to Turkey, vice versa, with the result that, for instance, tending vineyard, which was a specialty for those Turks living in Greece, was not successfully carried on by the Turks who received the land of the former Greeks. Well, under the Ottoman rule, they all were members of a certain millet. The Greeks were the member of the Orthodox millet, and the Turks were the members of the dominant Sunnite group. Consideration based on the supremacy of the white race produced a hierarchy among races, established categories of unwanted population groups, such as Asians in regard of Australia, Jews, blacks in regard of Europe. In these periods before the end of World War II. The byproduct of migration, which may affect the character of a given state, such as a transformation from a homogeneous population into a heterogeneous one, paired with eugenic concerns, occupies even today a major place in discussions on migratory policies. Those of you who have got hold of Theo Sarrazin's book, Germany Destroys Itself, have certainly noticed that for Mr. Sarrazin, who was the Deputy General Director of the German Central Bank in Frankfurt, considers Turks as people with very low IQ, procreating a great number of children and being not very diligent. By sheer coincidence, 2 or 3 days ago, a decision of the German government caught my attention. The German government has decided to spend a very large sum of money to select super intelligent Turkish youngsters to whom they will give a special education, because their concern of dwindling the German population, increasingly dwindling, the forecast for 2030 is that it will go below the normal growing rate, can only be saved if gifted young migrants, Germany being the host of the largest group of Turks in Europe, German authorities would like these youngsters to stay in Germany. The trend today is to go out of Germany. More and more statistics are revealing that successful second generation, third generation youngsters of Turkish origin who live in Europe prefer to come back to Turkey. So, as you see, calculations on the structure of population apparently is not going to stop. These, but we have to not to overlook that all with these arguments come out as a logical result of the strengthening of nationalism. The role of the state, therefore, the role of the state becomes dominant. The actors within the migratory process have to come in terms with policies of the state policies, the country they aim to reach. This attitude creates, among others, a worldwide division into two categories, rich states and weak states. Obviously, this division is based upon an asymmetrical approach. The willingness or unwillingness of the rich states determines the chances of the citizens of less fortunate states. The desperados drowning in the sea, the wetbacks sent back at the frontier, the refugees sent back to their home country, all of these people experience tragic results of their choice. Too often the price paid are the death of innumerable innocent children and women. These phenomena pushes major international bodies, such as the League of Nations, its successor, the United Nations, regional bodies such as the Council of Europe, later the European Union, to elaborate major guidelines which have to be followed by the member states. Similarly, specialized international bodies like ILO, UNESCO, UNICEF also started some programs, including the drafting of conventions to meet the needs of the migrants. A third sequence produced a new outlook on migration. Nowadays, it's no more sufficient that individual states prepare special legislation about the rights and obligations of potential migrants and refugees. The fast spreading of technological innovations, which results in the abolition of time and space. Don't forget, the stock market in New York closes, Tokyo opens. When Tokyo closes, then Frankfurt opens. So 24-hour, the capitalist system is functioning. And with the internet, you don't need time. So neither time nor space is anymore an obstacle. But it's not an obstacle for people who want to move out of their countries. However, those who come to the frontier of the rich countries are not always welcome. And therefore, we are facing now the period of secularization. Large regional budgets, such as the Common Market, which later became the European Union, EFTA, a regional three countries body embracing Mexico, USA, and Canada, creates joint legislation about entry and exit of migrants. The European product, being the Schengen Agreement, opens the way for the free circulation of labor among the member states, while building up huge obstacles for the non-members. All of these policies results, among others, in the swelling number of illegal migrants. The allegory Fortress Europe, beleaguered by countless unfortunate aspirants, becomes a reality. How important illegal migrants are, the best proof is the decision of President Obama to permit 5 million illegal migrants, or maybe the children of these illegal migrants, to receive the permission to stay on. This is very much contested on one side. On the other side, don't forget that in spite of all automation, all the vegetables and all the fruits of California and other places in America are not picked by the machines. So you need extra hands to pick the crops. So, for millions of people, the Statue of Liberty in America, in New York, the shores of Italy or Spain, the frontier of Poland or Bulgaria becomes a constant unrealized dream. While the regular media, paired with the impact of publicity and communication over internet links, such as Twitter, Facebook, creates innumerous encounters in the cyberspace, the social phenomena of choosing a new place for the building up of a new existence takes new forms. Gone are the days when states, as in the case of after World War II, anxious to help defeated countries to rebuild their shattered industry, engaged labor import from population-rich but economic weak countries. The most striking example is the bracero policy in the United States and the famous guest worker program of Germany and other European states. These are the days when the 1,000th worker from Turkey was met in Munich at the railroad station with fanfare and a radio set. TV was not yet accessible for everybody at that time. Much has changed since. Today, the clock is ticking differently. Goodbye to the outworn elder migrants who have not learned the native language, insisting of keeping promising young new citizens, trying to keep them from moving elsewhere. Special programs for the training of over-intelligent youngsters. At this stage, which coincides with the early 60s, until the first half of the 70s, the nature of migration experiences undergoes a major change. The appearance of bilateral agreements signed between sending and receiving countries becomes the rule. The role of individual decisions, while persisting, becomes subject of anonymous regulations. One of its byproducts is the economic the possibility to apply for entry in the new country by claiming to be persecuted, by applying to be accepted as a refugee and granted asylum. This trend grew extremely fast in the 90s, and the emergence of these so-called pseudo-economic migrants led in Germany, for instance, the revocation of the most liberal legislation, such as the Article 16 of the German Grundgesetz, which was permitting claim of refugee to be accepted, regardless of any precondition. This was changed, and similarly, other countries also redrafted their legislation. Again, during these years, the acquisition of the citizenship of the host country emerges as one of the major targets of migrants. The whole complex problem of dual citizenship, its limits, the requirements to be fulfilled for its acquisition, produces various criticized policies, such as the conscience test, which was applied in Baden-Württemberg for candidates who wanted to get German citizenship. This conscience test was then abolished by the German Constitutional Court. But at present, again, special tests are applied in Holland and in Denmark for potential newcomers, and particularly in case of family reunion. This develops going hand in hand with the re-evaluation of multiculturalism. Now, Professor Rinus Pennings was, in the time, the author of a governmental declaration which was accepting the protection of minority rights, which meant all kind of cultural activities and demands of different minority groups are getting official support. This policy, after the assassination of two Dutch politicians, particularly the grandson of painter Van Dyck, created an uproar, and nowadays for Holland and for Madame Merkel, multiculturalism is dead. She says multiculti is no more living. Now, researchers of migration also started to be preoccupied with the conditions for easier integration, debating in length the role of mother tongue education, the concept of fundamental rights such as the right to learn one's mother tongue, paired with the right to acquire the major element of one's faith, religion, emerges as another unsolved issue, not to be overlooked. The whole problematic of female migration, its consequences, family reunion, discrepancy of wage structure against women, strong pressure of conservative environment prevents women to achieve full emancipation, together with the problem of bride migration, sexual exploitation. All these topics are still on the table and they are not solved. With the incredible speed of the spread of internet, one of the major consequences of global capitalism is the emergence of new forms of migration. Again, they become the target for new investigation. What are these new forms? First, circular migration. Circular migration means qualified, highly qualified, normally qualified or low qualified manpower is collected together, is taken by an entrepreneur to a given country, where time-bound projects are carried out, and when these projects are completed, the entrepreneur again ships the whole group, beginning from the engineer down to the simple worker, and shifts them elsewhere. By doing so, circular migration is taking place. Circular migration can also be understood as the moving around of high-quality manpower. That is also another form of it. And the attraction to participate in these projects are very much monetary. I mean, usually the wages are paid in dollars, and therefore euro, and therefore they become very attractive. The unplanned consequences is that under certain circumstances, the members of that, traveling unit is changing. For instance, workers who have taken up a job in Russia, a very large number of Turkish workers are employed in Russian construction projects, are telling newspaper interviewers that they learned to buy flowers to their girlfriend, go to the concert, enjoy the ballet, and thus become a cultural personality. So it's not always negative, it sometimes is also educative. Now, another form of migration, which has totally a political character, is the role of the diaspora. Once you have a large number of people of a given country which is established in another country, such as there are today more than 4 million Turks in Germany, or I don't know how many million Irishmen in New York. Each of these groups are exercising not only economic impact, not only a social impact, but also a very serious political impact, because they are articulating demands on behalf of their own interests, also on behalf of the political party which is sympathetic to them. This summer, a team of Boğaziçi University, with me together, undertook a small project on the on the voting behavior of Turkish voters abroad, which indicated, for instance, that the popularity of President Erdogan has been much higher in Europe than in Turkey. The average difference is 10%, but at certain cities it even goes up to 80%, such as in Vienna. But of course the participation in the electoral process, because it had to be done via internet and appointment, was very low. So the results are not representative, but they are still revealing a certain trend. Again, a new way of trying to understand migration in the 21st century leads us to re-evaluate the role of cities and locations in regard of migration. Finally, armed conflicts in failed states such as Africa, Somalia, Sudan, and the Middle East, the emergence of extreme violence based on the missionary efforts, such as in the case of ISIS in Islamic countries, terrorist attacks among Palestinians and Israelis, Hindus and Muslims in India, banning of organized groups such as Tibetan in China, suppressed religious sects such as the Yazidis, Nasturians, Alawites, alike in Europe, produces a backlash on political rights. These developments brings us to conclude that the issue of migrants' comportment and the existence of migrants as a minority or majority group in a given country exercise the most important role on the given power structure. So far, no European prime minister or president has been able to live through an election campaign without referring day and night about his ideas of migration. The most extreme is, for instance, the daughter of Le Pen in the French national movement, who advocates to send all of the non-desired migrants home, which is, of course, meaning the Algerians, Tunisians, etc. Formulate differently is the problematic of Abadanat, which oblige members of persecuted secret faith formation to hide themselves until recent years. They now are coming out of the closet. The best striking example is the formal agreement signed by the German federal states, Landes unit, such as Hamburg, Bremen, Berlin, and Hessen. They concluded official agreements with the Alawite communities. They are recognizing their way of worshiping as unique. They are accepting the Jamevis, the congregation places, as a worshiping place. They are accepting their holidays, and they introduced teaching the Alawite faith in school. Thus, the problem of identity formation, the branding of treating the foreigners as the other, exploring the size of minority groups, reveals us astonishing numbers, such as in the case of Turkey, where some publication cites 43 different ethnic and religious groups. Attempting to engage myself in details, I would like to conclude my remarks on future areas of migration studies. It seems that much more effort has to be played on the issue of scale and rescale modern capitalism. As Nell Brenner has remarked, its differentiation among local, regional, national, transnational, and global geographical units is not a pre-existing feature of social life, but is rather a historical product. It is reorganized and contested. We need to find out why only the residents of Yeşildere on the Black Sea, a town of the province of Giresun, for the population of Yeşildere, a future career in New York and New Jersey is very probable because there is a network, a strong network. While the residents of Şebinkarahisar, which is another town of Giresun, have never been, not to speak of the ocean, but they have never seen the Black Sea. So the difference is very striking. Similar studies linked to former inhabitants of Kulu who are living in one of the suburbs of Stockholm requires a more careful assessment. As much as I have been informed, this is just a hearsay, a Swedish gentleman who was passing through Kulu had his car broken down, And while the car was repaired, he left his card. The result was that half of the population of Kulu, one by one, moved to Sweden. Of course, Sweden have never signed a labor exchange agreement. So the people from Kulu claim to be persecuted and they appealed as refugees, but they were accepted. I must tell you my encounter with a woman in Stockholm some years ago. Walking in the park, I see from far a woman coming. She was wearing the traditional large trousers, and of course she was veiled. I greeted her. She smiled and answered back. All her teeth were covered with gold, because that's another practice in certain parts of Anatolia. It shows that you are well off. And then I was asking her, well, what are you doing? I mean, she's the wife of a cook. Well, I said, where is your husband? Oh, my husband has gone to Turkey. I'm alone here. Since when are you in Stockholm? Something like 20 years. And then I said, do you listen? I mean, that was summer 1979. I said, do you listen to the Turkish broadcast? She says, I like it, but I don't know how to open the radio. So this is showing the way, I mean, life in a ghetto, what that means. Now, what appears to be one of the major fields of future research in migration studies will be the contribution to understand better social movements. And therefore, we have to read better Sidney Tarot and Donatella Della Porte, their publications, and their urban and regional studies. We also have to study environmental geography. Important personalities such as Manuel Castell have rightly attacked the Chicago School of Urban Sociology for its failure to grasp the historical specificity of the urban form under capitalism. Against this universalistic urban sociology, Castell set out to delimit the role of the urban system. He insists on recognizing the social content. Again, coming back to Turkish scholars who tried to understand certain behavior of Turkish migrants, we could cite Ayhan Kaya. One of his books is called Sicher in Kreuzberg, where the persons who are questioned about their allegiance reply that they are neither belonging to Europe nor to Berlin, but only to Kreuzberg, while applying the same criteria in their allegiance to Turkey, saying that they are not considering themselves very much as the citizen of Turkey and not even of Istanbul, but they are faithful to Kadıköy. So you have here the combination of the Kreuzberg-Kadıköy citizen. Another team of researchers pairing Nina Glick-Schiller with Ayşe Çağlar, who is here, but I have not been able to salute her, are rightly insisting that building theories about migrant settlement and transnational connection has to be built upon selecting paradigmatic cities. This type of vision may help us to understand the dynamics of religious sects and other social movements within the limits of ghetto formation in major cities such as Berlin, Köln, Amsterdam, Brussels. Last but not least, the pattern of external voting used for the first time by Turkish expatriates during the presidential election suggests that voting behavior has to be one of the next new field of exploration to be tackled. Studies in this direction are existing in most democratic countries, where it is in usage since long time. Let's remember Lazarselt and his famous book, The Voter's Choice, which was published in the 50s. But this is not the case for migrant sending countries. Another extremely important aspect of future studies consists of the large unexplored field of cyberspace and its major product, the social media. Even personalities occupying the highest office, such as the head of state, have been using Twitter as a means of exchanging ideas with their constituency. For instance, Abdullah Gül, the former president, has been claiming that he has, I think, 10,000 or more followers on the Twitter account. The question, how does the media nowadays build up the image of leading political personalities and exercise their influence on a large, almost unlimited audience of potential voters, demand further studies. As an example, the comforting image of Mrs. Merkel, Mutti takes care of us, has contributed to her success. Germans are like to be relaxed and safe and sure of their future. They don't want to engage in any experiment. I don't want to conclude my remarks concerning future fields of research without mentioning the new published results about modern slaves released by the Australian Walkfrey Foundation. According to their findings, carried out in 167 countries, about 35,800,000 people are living under slave-like conditions. According to the index of this foundation, in Turkey there are 185,000 estimated modern slaves. The high number in Turkey is explained by the large number of child brides and forced marriages. Turkey is listed as the country in Europe with the highest number of modern slaves. It ranks out of 167 countries and occupies the place of 105th. Half of modern slaves around the globe are living in following countries: India, China, Pakistan, Uzbekistan, and Russia. Well, dear listeners, I did not engage myself in discussing further the roots of Islamophobia. That would take another hour. But when I started my research on migration on behalf of the State Planning Organization in Turkey in 1963, I never thought that I was pushed into a pit without ground. This is maybe the reason why I called one of my last books Migration Without End, From Guest Worker to Transnational Citizen. I guess in the next edition, I will have to slightly modify the title and add the concept of from guest worker to transnational citizen, and from there to planetary citizen, because we have to expect that an avatar, a kind of creature is going to come from some planet and will force us also to study who is going to migrate to Mars or to the moon. I believe that as long as human curiosity endures, there is no end for scientific research. Therefore, I want to conclude with Mustafa Kemal Atatürk's remark, which is written on the head of the Faculty of Humanities in Ankara, who says, "For me, the real guide in life is science." Thank you so much.